Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I'm watching South Korea is Over by Kurzgesagt. The first thing that comes to mind when I see this title is that South Korea has a population crisis on its hands because people are just not making enough kids. So maybe that's part of this, I don't know. Let's just see.
South Korea is over. This sounds brutal, but South Korea will soon start melting on all fronts. Demographically, economically, socially, culturally, and militarily. Because for decades, the country has been experiencing a fertility crisis unprecedented in human history. And we've probably reached a point of no return. By
0.07 kids per woman. Holy crap. They really just don't want to have kids, eh? I didn't think the situation in South Korea was that bad. I mean, I knew it wasn't great, but this is far worse than I believed it to be.
60, the South Korea we know and love today will no longer exist. What will the collapse look like? And why is it now almost impossible to stop? The real population bomb. To have a stable population, you need a fertility rate of about 2.1 children per woman. In the 1950s, South Koreans used to have 6 children on average.
Holy shit.
In the 1980s, the rate fell below 2.
How did it fall that quickly?
And in 2023, it was 0.72 kids per woman, the lowest ever recorded in history. In Seoul, fertility is even lower, around 0.55. On average, about half of the women here won't have any kids, and the other half just one. What do these numbers actually mean in the real world? If fertility stays as it is, then 100 South Koreans will have 36 kids. When they grow up,
it's just going to keep
they will
dropping.
have 13 kids, who will then have 5. Within 4 generations, 100 South Koreans will turn into 5. If we look at today's South Korean population...
Obviously, that is assuming that the fertility rate doesn't go up or down and stays the same, which, given current trends, it's probably just going to keep dropping. So that means it's going to be even less within the first 3 generations. There might not even be a 4th one. Or hell, maybe it's just suddenly going to go up. It probably isn't. There's no magic fix for this type of thing. Their population is probably just slowly going to die out.
Pyramid, we see this is pretty real. There's only one 1-year-old for 4 50-year-olds. After 4 decades below the replacement level, the consequences were still largely invisible. Today, South Korea's population is at an all-time high, as are its workforce and its GDP, which is still growing. But demographics hits you like a freight train. You hear it vaguely in the distance, and then it runs you over. South Korea is about to be hit. Let's time travel 35 years into the future.
To be fair, it's not just South Korea experiencing this problem, it's plenty of countries.
When it comes to
I mean, even countries that are currently way above the 2.1 kids per woman, they're also going to fall down and get to this point at some point in the future.
Demographics, the most commonly used projections are those put together by the UN. They envisage 3 scenarios: low fertility, medium, and high. But in the past, all medium UN projections for South Korea have consistently been too positive. Between 2022 and 2023 alone, fertility in South Korea dropped by another 8%. So we're going to use the latest low fertility scenario, which has been the most accurate in the last few years. Keep in mind that we're still talking about projections, and the future is
none of this
far
is
away
like a guarantee.
Okay, let's do it. In 2060, South Korea's population pyramid will look like this. The population will have shrunk by 30%.
You know, all those people between the age of 20 to 40 will have to work for the people between the ages of 60 and 100. This is about as terrible as it gets.
16 million South Koreans will have disappeared in just 35 years. And it'll be the oldest country in human history. 1 in 2 South Koreans will be over the age of 65. Less than 1 in 10 will be under 25. And only 1 in 100 will be small children. Imagine waking up in a country where the streets are strangely quiet with no children playing on them. Entire cities have been abandoned. Half of the population is elderly and living either alone or in overcrowded retirement homes.
Yeah, who's going to take care of those people?
Desperately trying to keep society running. There will be a few major consequences. Economic collapse. In 2023, a breathtaking 40% of South Koreans over 65 lived below the poverty line. But in 2060, this number may seem lovely in comparison. Today, South Korea has one of the largest pension funds in the world, worth about 730 billion US dollars.
Wow.
But it's projected to stop growing in the 2040s and be completely depleted by the 2050s. So in 2060, pensions will have to be paid by the working population.
Exactly. That's what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about how the people between the ages of 20 and 40 would have to support those between the ages of 60 to 100. You have such a small percentage of the population working to support so many people who can't do anything. In a situation like this, you have to stop thinking about these people as people and just think of them as numbers. Nothing more, nothing less. For the government, people above the age of 65, retirement age when you can no longer work, those people are basically useless. Because what are they doing? They get benefits from their country, such as, their pension. They also have a lot of medical bills because they're sick, they're old, they're just going to keep getting sicker. So these people will take up a lot of resources while not giving anything back to the government because, well, they no longer work. So for the government, these people are useless. They don't really contribute to anything anymore. They're too old to have kids, they're too old to work, they take up resources, and somebody has to spend time and money to take care of them. So these people contribute nothing to the country itself, not anymore, because they've reached the age where they simply cannot do so. Yeah, an aging population it's a terrible thing.
Estimates vary, but for a pension system to work, the minimum a society needs is between 2 to 3 workers per retiree paying for them with their taxes.
Per one. Wow.
But even if we
That's
assume
not gonna
all
happen.
South Koreans over 15 will be working in 2060, the country will have less than 1 worker per senior. Workers will be unable to stem the incredible costs. So not only will poverty among the elderly be common, but a big chunk will be forced to work. Except they may not be able to find jobs because by 2060, the South Korean economy may have collapsed. Broadly speaking, the size of an economy is linked to the size of its workforce. To have a big economy, you need a lot of workers to produce
Smaller
a lot
workforce,
of things
smaller
and a lot
economy.
more people to buy them. Today, South Korea has about 37 million people of working age, generating a GDP of about 1.7 trillion US dollars. But by 2060, its workforce would have shrunk to less than half, to about 17 million. Of course, technological progress means that productivity will be higher and each individual will probably produce more than today. But even if productivity keeps growing at the same rate or more than we've seen in the last decades, South Korea's GDP could peak in the 2040s. In other words, South Korea will enter a permanent economic recession. There are more optimistic projections that see the recession begin as late as 2050, but they're based on the medium UN demographic scenario, and there are
Is that really more positive? It's gonna start 10 years later, but it's still going to start. You can't stop it, so I don't really see that as more positive. I just see that as delaying the inevitable.
no signs that we're heading there. Another factor in the economy is science, technology, and innovation, areas in which big leaps are typically made by young adults and the middle-aged. Young people have fresh ideas that contribute to the wealth of society. Significantly fewer people working also means way less tax for the government, which will be trapped between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, having to provide for half the population that are seniors, on the other, seeing its income diminished. It will be forced to shut down or cut essential services like hospitals or social benefits. Since infrastructure only works at scale, smaller communities may be abandoned as the country contracts into its metropolitan areas. And of course, there won't be enough money to invest in the future.
People are just going to start moving, certain parts of the country are just going to start being abandoned. It makes sense trying to get people to move into one spot, because that way you can really cut down on costs. But it's not a good thing. It isn't.
This is bad. But what will happen to South Korean society and culture may be worse. Societal and cultural collapse. Speculating on how societies will develop is extra hard, but there are a few pretty unavoidable trends. Today, already about 20% of Koreans live alone. Also, 20% report having no close friends or relatives. By 2060, 50% of South Koreans aged 70 will have no siblings and 30% will have no children. Young adults between 25 and 35 will only make up 5% of the population and typically have no siblings at all. This leaves the elderly with almost no close family and young adults with little family and few potential friends, especially outside of big cities. A loneliness epidemic of epic proportions is all but guaranteed. On top of that, South Korean culture will probably experience a huge decline. In 2000, there were 17.5 million South Koreans between 25 and 45, and they made up 37% of the population. This was the generation that brought us K-pop, K-drama, K-food, and many other trends that spread around the world. In 2060, there will be just 5.6 million people in that age group, and they'll only be 16% of the population. Many cultural traditions are already struggling because the older generations are having trouble finding young people to pass them on to. As young people disappear, many traditions will die out. Without young people, the soul of South
As young people disappear, it's going to die out. Was that a mistake? Did he mean to say old people? Or did he mean young people because even though they're failing, they're still trying to pass it on to those young people? I don't know. Whatever.
South Korean culture will shrink and wither away. And on a personal level, what kind of experience will it be growing up in 2060? What will youth culture be like in a country of seniors, where many universities, schools and kindergartens are abandoned as there are no longer children to fill them with life? What kind of job prospects will they face, and what will politics look like? If young people don't want to remain alone, they'll concentrate in Seoul or a few other big cities, or worse for South Korea, emigrate to other countries. Rural
Emigration in a situation like this is pretty much the absolute worst thing that could happen, because they're just going to lose even more young people that way, which will only speed up the collapse of their population.
areas will decline, and most smaller cities will turn into ghost towns. We're already seeing this in Japan, which has almost 10 million abandoned houses in rural areas.
Wow.
Large parts of South Korea will simply vanish and be reclaimed by nature. Last but not least, South and North Korea are technically at war, and they could very well still be in 2060.
They definitely
South Korea
will
still
be
able to afford to have its young men do 18 months of mandatory military service? Today, 5% of men of combat age are enrolled in the military. In 2060, it would have to be 15% just to match today's numbers. Okay,
Damn.
wait, this is all a bit much. Is there no way back? Why, there really is no way back. The problem with the demographic freight
How
train
would you
is that
recover
once
from
it
this?
hits, things become irreversible. Let's say fertility in South Korea magically triples to the replacement rate of 2.1 children per woman and stays there. In 2060, it will be an inverted pyramid on top of a barrel. And there would still be only 1.5 people of working age per senior over 65. Even in the best made-up scenario, South Korea has to pass through an unavoidable bottleneck before it will recover. But there is also a kernel of hope here. Yes, the situation is grim, but at least in the long term, recovery is possible if South Korea enacts rapid and societal changes that make its population want to have kids.
There is a big problem with this. People are resistant to change. Also, trying to tell women you need to have 2.1 kids on average is definitely not going to fly. They're definitely not going to want to have kids, especially not multiple. Call me old-fashioned if you want, but the fact that women are focusing on their careers instead of starting families at a younger age has certainly contributed to this. You can deny it all you want, but it certainly has.
Kids again. In 2024, births rose for the first time in 9 years, 3% more than in 2023.
That's
But
such
for
a
that to
tiny
continue,
raise.
South Korea needs to face the music and ask how they got to this point. How could it get that bad? In general, as societies get richer, more educated, and child mortality plummets, people decide to have fewer kids. What makes South Korea special is that it's somehow supercharging all of these trends. South Korea lifted itself out of poverty in record time, but in doing so it developed a unique kind of workaholism and extreme competitiveness. Although the work week is 40 hours and the legal maximum is 52 per week, unpaid overtime is normal for many, and the government even proposed to raise legal work time to
Wait. Unpaid overtime? Whoa. No.
69 hours per week.
Nice.
Despite this,
I mean,
South
not
Korea
nice,
has
but
relatively low wages and
you know
a
what
high
I mean.
cost of living. Real estate in big cities is out of reach for most people. The cost of education is extremely high, since families have to pay for private lessons if they want to send their kids to a high-tier college. All of this while South Korea spends less on family benefits than most other rich countries. Old-fashioned cultural norms make matters even worse. Marriage is all but mandatory if a couple wants to start a family. In 2023, only 4.7% of babies were born to unmarried women. Out of all developed countries, South Korean men do just about the least share of housework and childcare within their families. This leaves women with a disproportionate amount of work if they want to keep their jobs after a pregnancy, while many men are overwhelmed by the societal expectation to be the main breadwinner and have successful careers. Starting a family or not is a personal decision, and most South
It's normal for the South Koreans for women to work, but men are still supposed to be the main source of income. They're still supposed to be the one who brings food to the table. Seems kind of weird to me. It seems almost as if they're mixing, how would you call this? Two different systems? Yeah, fuck it. Let's just say systems. You have the first one, which is the woman stays at home, takes care of the kids, the house, the man goes to work and makes money. And then you have the more modern one, where both parents go to work and they don't have time for kids. It seems almost as if they're mixing both of them, which seems to be a problem in pretty much every Western country, every rich country.
South Koreans are deciding against it. The bottom line is that South Korea has created a culture that leads to very few kids. Conclusion. Demographic collapse is not an abstract thing in the future, it's happening right now. And it's not just South Korea. In 2023, China had a fertility rate of 1, Italy and Spain 1.2, Germany 1.4, the UK 1.0.
Well, I mean, China had the one-child policy, so they can only really blame themselves. Well, to be fair, any country that's experiencing a fucking population decrease can only blame themselves because they've created the means which have caused this.
0.6 and the US 1.6, which sounds so much better, doesn't it? Well, after 4 generations,
no.
a fertility rate of 1.6 means 60%
This is
fewer
all
new
still
people.
population
A
decreases.
fertility rate of 1.2 means 87% fewer people. And fertility rates are still falling with no sign of stabilization or recovery. The weirdest thing about all of this is that almost nobody involved in the public discourse has truly grasped the gravity of the situation. The last century was utterly dominated by overpopulation narratives, and people who say that we need more kids seem weird. And if you do the maths, the future just seems to be too insane to be true, like it's hard to believe. None of this has ever happened before. So low birth rates are mostly discussed in the context of worker shortages, not as
Yeah, people were talking about overpopulation and have less kids. Well, people had less kids. Now we have the problem of we don't have enough kids. So now we need more kids. Humanity creating its own problems once again.
the existential threat to our societies, cultures, wealth, and our way of life that they are. If we don't take it seriously very soon and change the DNA of our modern societies in a way that encourages young people to start having children again, then the rest of the century will be pretty grim for those of us who will live through it. The demographic freight train stops for nobody. We finally need to realize that it's hurtling down the tracks right at us.
Yeah, personally, I don't see any way you could solve this issue. I mean, my own country is experiencing this problem as well. Here in Poland in 2023, we had, I think, 1.4 kids per woman, which is really terrible, really low. Our government has tried to solve this issue by offering benefits the more kids you have. But quite obviously, this hasn't exactly worked. Not enough, at least. Yeah, I personally just don't believe this will be solved. I also think that this is the most likely way that humanity will eventually die out. You would think that the reason humanity will die in the future is because of some sort of nuclear war or something, Armageddon, but nope, we're probably all just gonna slowly die out because people are just not reproducing enough. But yeah, it is what it is. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider subscribing and leaving a like. If you're interested, why not watch this video right here? And with that, I'll see you in the next video.